Thank you so
Yeah,
much.
we got to start and then we'll.
Thank you so much.
Oh,
Thank you.
awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Love it.
it's adorable.
Thank you.
You guys are awesome. Oh my gosh. I was like, I saw that. I was so happy yesterday. Made my day.
Oh, we got a funky kind of.
All right, thank you, everybody. We're going to get started on our next session, which is going to focus on the. We're going to have a conversation about immigration, the impact of immigration on the 2020 elections, and a number of other policy impacts of immigration. And over the course of the past few years, since the campaign of Donald Trump took off, immigration has been pushed to the forefront as a central issue in this country. There's been a number of immigration policies implemented that target not only the Arab community and Muslim community, but all immigrant communities. And we have seen the campaign promises of a Muslim ban turn into policy practices. We've seen the promise of building a wall turn into diverting funds meant for education and meant for other issues to taking down to the southern border and literally building a wall, which is a waste of money. We're seeing the separation of children from their parents at the border. We're seeing the asylum policies and practices flipped upside down. We're seeing delays in citizenship applications. We're seeing delays in other types of applications. Visas are being denied from Arab and Muslim countries. Folks trying to bring their spouses here are running into years on end of delays. And it's really flipped the whole immigration process, as I said, upside down. And it's important to remember that a lot of the policies and a lot of the policies are meant to impact immigrant communities as a whole. When you look at something such as the Muslim ban, you need to keep in context the wall, the separation of children, the stopping of migration, the stopping of the refugee program. All of this is tied into an anti-immigrant, xenophobic agenda here in the U.S. And we're seeing the fallout of that every day. You hear more and more of abuses by CBP. You hear more and more raids happening in different cities where individuals who've been here 20, 30 years are picked up and sent back to a country they haven't been to since they were children, a country they're not familiar with. You're hearing individuals from Iraq who are deported, who shouldn't have been deported, and a week later they end up dead. So it is a very troubling time and era we're in, and there's not a single issue right now as divisive as immigration is in this country. And the reality is, the problem is, our president will keep dividing on this issue during the election and creating it as a wedge issue. And this will lead into a fallout at the polls. This will lead into more hate crimes. This will lead into more bigotry. And this will have a lasting impact. Win or lose, this is going to have a lasting impact. His legacy is going to have a lasting impact on this country, where he has brought back into the openness, hatred, and bigotry and anti-immigrant policies. So we're thankful today to be joined by three professionals and friends of ADC and who have worked with the organization on a number of issues. And they'll get into a little bit of the work they do, and we'll have a conversation about, their perspectives. But to, my immediate left, we have Sergio Perez, who is a local attorney with the Franco Law Group, correct?
That's correct, yes.
Franco Law Group, who's done a number of tremendous work in this area. We have Nicholas Espirito from NILC, who is the National Immigration Law Center, they have done tremendous work not only on the Muslim ban, but on other issues, public charge issues, getting the information out on green card changes, on any policy change or anything that impacts the immigrant communities. NILC is one of the first to respond. After the ban, they were out there and getting information to the public. They're out there on the Hill. Their policy team in D.C. does tremendous work, and we're proud to call them a partner, and we do work with them daily on issues that impact immigrant communities. And at the end of the table is my colleague and ADC Senior Staff Attorney, Aman Bukadoum, who joined the organization a little under a year ago and brought a fresh voice and a fresh perspective to the legal department, given her work and background on the ground in the New York, New Jersey area with impacted immigrant communities, particularly women who face issues here in the U.S. So she brings that fresh perspective of what immigration policies and the impact they have on the ground. So we're going to have a conversation. I'll ask a few questions from each of our panelists, and then we'll open it up to question and answer from the audience. But I am going to start with Sergio, since he is the practicing attorney that's out on the field every day, kind of getting a perspective of what you have seen, the changes you've seen on the impact daily at the immigration courts and elsewhere with removals and so forth that impacting the immigrant communities in this country.
Yes, thank you for inviting me to be here. It's an honor. And as Abed mentioned, my firm and I practice immigration law before the immigration courts and before the immigration agencies, particularly USCIS, U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services. And I started practicing immigration law under the Obama administration. And I was telling someone in the audience earlier that I consider those the happy times. And since Trump got elected, it's been like living in a professional nightmare. Every morning reading legal updates, it seems like daily something gets taken away that benefits our clients. A little bit here, a little bit there, sometimes small, sometimes major. Usually it seems to be a major thing. And this, in my opinion, bespeaks the problem with not having an independent immigration judiciary. And you may or may not know that the immigration apparatus of the United States is under the executive branch, meaning the president and his cabinet. So there's nothing that exists like Article 3 judges that are independent in their own branch, the judiciary branch. So any new administration can make whatever changes they want, pretty much, as far as the application and enforcement of immigration laws. And that's why Trump has been able to make all the drastic changes that he has made. The cases where I see the worst impact are asylum cases. Most of my clients fall into there are certain categories that are bases for asylum. Political opinion, race, religion, and there's an amorphous category called particular social group. And there's a whole body of case law defining what constitutes a particular social group for purposes of asylum. And that case law is made by an agency, partly made by an agency called the Board of Immigration Appeals, which is also under the executive branch. So our former friend, Jeff Sessions, he has the authority, had the authority as the Attorney General to overrule any precedent decision of the Board of Immigration Appeals that he wanted. So particular social groups that we had available for a lot of our clients that didn't fit neatly into the other categories, categories dealing with domestic violence victims. One that was recently taken away is if you were part of a certain family group. That's gone now under Attorney General Barr. So it was already not so easy to win asylum cases for particular social group cases. Now it's even harder. And another ironic thing that I've seen more on the USCIS side is that for all the talk that Trump has made about getting immigrants out of the country quickly, is that he's actually bogged everything down, and now everything is moving a lot more slowly, which if a client has a bad case, it actually helps them because it extends their time in the country. They can take care of their affairs and whatnot before an order of removal becomes final. But I'm expecting that things are just going to keep getting worse until he is either arrested or voted out of office, which is more likely to happen. And my concern is that he has done irreparable damage that perhaps even if we have a new Democratic president, that they won't be fast to act to undo all the damage. That if they do act, it'll be very slowly. So.
Thank you.
Certainly.
Thank you. Thank you, sir. Just want to also say we're a nonpartisan organization. But look, I mean, frankly, I mean, if the guy is doing what he's doing, I mean, we know he's got to be replaced with anything better than him. So we don't endorse, but we can call out bigotry and hatred that's taken over that party, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with, making that clear that a lot of the policies that Trump has implemented are Trump policies through executive orders and actions. So it's not like there was a bipartisan effort to do this. The man single-handedly did this. So next I'm going to turn it over to Nico, who's going to, I just want to touch, if you could touch base a little bit on the great work you guys are doing at NILC, but also the broader issue on the impact, the litigation and the work you guys are doing on these policies, and, whether or not that's going to change, the impact and change that we'll have, in 2020, whether win or lose, and are we looking at lasting policies even beyond this administration?
Yeah, no, thank you. So in January of 2017, on a Friday night, we learned that Trump had instituted his first iteration of the Muslim ban, and in the next few hours, we filed litigation on behalf of a couple clients from Iraq who had come in and had landed in New York, but were being denied entry under the first of these proclamations. We were successful in that case. We got our clients released. We got that initial version blocked. So all that work of all those lawyers can be quickly undone with another stroke of the pen, where we would get a victory in court, he would come up with a new proclamation to try to come around it. This happened in 3 different iterations just on the initial versions of the ban. And what that says to me is that the man currently in office has a tremendous amount of power, and we have had to expend a tremendous amount of resources just on that issue. Since that point, the ways in which this administration has attempted to impact communities of color, Latino, African, Arab, Muslim, have been devastating. We have tried our best to fight back at every instance. In fact, just yesterday, we got a good ruling pushing back on one of the latest efforts to impact our communities. So folks may or may not have heard of the latest changes to federal regulations that would expand who will be denied visas based on a determination that they are a quote-unquote public charge. So for those who don't know about this, for over 100 years in U.S. law, there has been a rule that said, well, if you are going to be institutionalized, completely committed to the government's care, the government can deny you access. Well, last year, the Trump administration tried to expand the definition of this public charge rule in such a radical way that it would essentially deny almost every poor and working person access to the country, because it would say that then those classes of folks would be public charges. Well, we know what immigrants who are coming in who are not very wealthy. It's our communities. It's our family members who may not have the deep resources that, say, the investor buddies of this current president might have. And so we filed litigation once again against this new public charge rule. And I don't know if folks saw, but just yesterday we saw courts throughout the country blocking this latest public charge rule. So, which is super exciting, except for, once again, we see that this administration has additional plans to still bar our families from being able to come and be here with us, and has done so through another proclamation using essentially the same claims to power that he asserted with the initial Muslim ban. So he is going to deny entry to individuals who are looking to come into the United States on visas, on immigrant visas, if they didn't already buy health plans to come in. he's going to deny our families the ability to use subsidized plans under the Affordable Care Act that are good quality plans which they would be eligible for when they got here. He's going to say, no, no, no. Even though federal law says that you can use these plans that you will be paying for, I'm going to deny you the ability to use these plans, which are the only truly affordable ones that our families will be able to get. And he's going to use this as a way to put a roadblock to ensuring that our communities can stay together. And once again, we're going to have to go into court. We're going to have to challenge this again and again and again. And to answer your question maybe more directly, is that there is, and to relate to what my colleague Sergio said, the federal executive has a tremendous amount of power to put policies in place. In fact, by one count, there has been a change to immigration policy every day of this administration. It is going to take a concerted effort by a new administration and coordinated effort between all of our communities to ensure that we push back when we have the power to return us to a place where we have a real ability to ensure that our communities stay together, our families come here, and that we have a fair and just immigration system.
Thank you. Thank you. And question for Iman, if you can elaborate a little bit more. I know we have the Muslim ban that's impacted our community, but what other policies are you seeing? From your time you've been with us at ADC and dealing with all the wonderful clients that call us for assistance to your prior life in New York on the ground. What are other issues that the community, folks in this room may not be aware of, but do have an impact on, green card holders as well as individuals trying to come here from, one of our countries?
Hello? Okay, thank you so much. It's so wonderful to be here in California discussing important immigration issues with all of you and with my incredible colleagues to my right. So to respond to your question, what issues in addition to the travel ban? That's hard since the travel ban has taken up so much of my life and my time in the last 2 years. But I would say it's not that hard, actually, because as my very able colleague just stated from NILC, every single day since this president took office, there have been immigration rules promulgated into the regulation code or into our statutes or in the courts by our Supreme Court, especially when they upheld the travel ban. So I would say the collateral consequences of a lot of the policies are something I would like to talk about. So for example, the travel ban itself is something that has been litigated to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court has already said that it is lawful because, as my two colleagues said, and they're geniuses, the executive has extraordinary power, and that's effectively what the law is today. The Supreme Court has said, yes, the executive is basically an imperial executive. I said it. He's effectively a king, right? He can, we say that in legal lingo, but he has extraordinary powers. So what does that mean? That means that the travel ban is legal. That means a lot of other things are going to be legal that aren't necessarily exactly like the travel ban. So, for example, one of the pieces of litigation that we are part of at ADC is it's the diversity visa lottery case. So that doesn't necessarily have to do squarely with the travel ban. It tangentially does. So there are a lot of people who are familiar with this. 50,000 people every single year are given the diversity visa through a lottery process. And we are challenging a lot of the people who have been denied their visas on the pretext of, based on this travel ban. And we're arguing that it's discriminatory and it's based on, national origin discrimination, et cetera. And we brought that case in DC, and we were told that we have no case, and it was thrown out. And then we appealed it to the DC Circuit, the second highest court in the country. And that court actually said that we do have a case. So it got remanded in August of this year, and now we're litigating that. So that's an example. So people who win the diversity visa, for example, 50,000 of them every year, a lot of them are people from those countries that are on that travel ban list, and they're impacted even though we wouldn't think that they would be, because that's a different issue, but it's actually not an issue. So that's an example of how this executive authority, this immigration authority that is aggressively attacking Arabs, Latinos, communities of color across our country and across the world is having devastating impact on people. So that's one example of how, so the diversity visa lottery program is being impacted by that. Another way that this administration's policies are impacting communities, particularly Arab American communities, is in the way that we see resettlement of Syrian refugees occurring. So for example, in Pittsburgh, we have a lot of cases of people who are being aggressively surveilled, aggressively asked questions by the FBI, whether they're terrorists, and sometimes they're not even Muslim, sometimes they're Christian Syrians. And it's just extraordinarily offensive because the rhetoric of this president is that we don't want refugees. It has nothing to do with religion or security. We know that that's all pretextual. So that's another area where we're seeing this administration's immigration policies and their just abhorrence of refugees generally, and of migrants, and of all people who are not of a certain, category, impacting communities on the ground. So we have been working very closely with communities on the ground in Pittsburgh of this resettled Syrian community to see what we can do to try to alleviate a lot of the problems there. So we see over-policing, over-surveillance, we see aggressive revocation of people's visas from certain countries, particularly countries where there is a need for people to come into this country because they're refugees. So it's a really devastating time right now for a lot of communities of color. And as my colleagues have stated, we have to have a concerted effort among us as advocates and also among communities on the ground to push back, hopefully when a new administration takes over.
Thank you, Iman. Thank you. Couple points I wanted to touch on as well, particularly with the ban. And I may have said something earlier that this man or this administration is implementing these policies, but do keep in mind that the framework for these policies has existed. The framework for the laws we have in this country are built on xenophobia, and they are not as free and liberating as we think. The laws in this country are built on white supremacist views and perspectives. So the immigration laws from the beginning were intended to ban people from coming in, and there's a long history on that. And the code or the regulations and the orders used for banning Muslims on this Muslim ban was used by Jimmy Carter to ban Iranians in the late 70s. It was used by Ronald Reagan at some point. It was used by George Bush to ban Kuwaitis and Iraqis after the Gulf War. So that framework is there. Obama kept the framework for NSEERs. George Bush implemented NSEERs, which forced the registration of individuals coming from one of the 22 Arab countries. The framework is there. The laws and the regulations are there. This system was built to impact our black and brown communities. So there's no doubt about that. And it's, these lawsuits and these cases are intended to, help folks in two ways. One is help on an individual level, where if somebody comes in and we help them, we do our best to get their situation cleared. The other is try to change policy. And that's what, what NILC is doing, the great work of organizations like that, where you are able to put a stop on these policies. But one thing that's out there is trying to get some legislative fixes. There is a No Ban Act that's pending. And Nico, if you could touch on, briefly, and I know NILC is doing a lot of work on the No Ban Act, and we are working with Odeh in D.C., but just if you could provide some insight on the, No Ban Act and your perspective as to whether, this goes far enough, or do we even see a chance of this moving forward and what it does?
Can I have you answer the No Ban Act stuff, and I can talk about some of the other stuff?
Sure.
Yeah, because you guys are doing a lot of the work. Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
Does that work for you?
Yeah.
Sure. So The No Ban Act is, as Abid mentioned, it's a piece of legislation. So ADC does a bunch of stuff. So we do litigation, so we fight injustice in the courts, we fight injustice in Congress, and we fight it on the ground. So I'm going to talk about the No Ban Act, which is the middle, which is Congress. So we're engaging Congress by proposing legislation that will repeal the travel ban. And it's called the No Ban Act. And we've been working in coalition with NILC and a whole bunch of organizations. Over 400 have signed on to it. And it would repeal the ban, and it would also require that a future president would not be able to instate such a ban because it's so outrageous. So that is what the No Ban Act is, and we have been working, like I said, in coalition with a lot of organizations. It was proposed months and months. I mean, we've been working on it for I think over a year now, and it was proposed by Congresswoman Judy Chu in the House and by Senator Coons out of the Senate. And we actually had a historic hearing just a few weeks ago, actually, less than a month ago, in Congress, where impacted communities came forward and spoke about the horrific impacts of this ban, how it's devastating families. There are people here in the United States who are American citizens with passports who are not allowed to bring their families over from Yemen, from Syria, from Libya, because of this draconian law. And it was very important because we actually had people there in front of Congress taking them to task, saying, hey, you're my congressperson, and this is okay with you? You're okay with this discrimination? And it was really moving and incredible, and we were all there with NILC and with a lot of our public interest allies, and also with private practitioners. And so it was really historic. So that's some of the work that we're doing on the No Ban Act. So we had this legislation. It's most of the Democrats in the House are good with it, and they've signed on to it. So right now it's circulating and it's making its way around the House. But we're hopeful that it will, at least if nothing else, continue the conversation, because so much of the Muslim ban or the travel ban or the refugee ban or the Arab ban or whatever you want to call it has been forgotten. There was that initial outpouring of support when everybody went to the airports, and then people forgot about it. And so we did this at least to reopen the conversation. Obviously, it's going to be a tough fight, but we're in it for the long haul. And we know that with litigation, with advocacy, and with public education, we will dismantle this fascist system. It can't continue. This is not who we are. We have to allow immigrants to come back into the country. This is part of our lifeblood as a country. So that's basically it with the No Ban Act.
Thank you, and I think it's important to keep, just to bring it into perspective with the election, the way in the state of politics and the state of the makeup of Congress is you're not going to have legislation passed in the House and the Senate with a democratically controlled House and a Republican Senate. So that's why the 2020 elections are just as important, and you do have to hold to task your elected officials and those that are running for office. Try to figure out where they stand on the issues. Push, when you go back to your districts, push their position on the No Ban Act, particularly with U.S. senators, and we need the Senate to step forward on this, and that's why these elections coming up in 2020 are very important. So this type of legislation can work its way through and to the desk of the president, and hopefully we will have a president at the time who sees value in repealing repealing the Muslim ban and repealing the framework that allows for this type of these types of actions to be put into place. I'm going to ask Sergio a question. I think that relates to everybody and most in this room. Is oftentimes what is the faults of the community? What are we overlooking on the immigration aspect, just daily? If folks in this room can go back and to their loved ones, family members looking to come here, or folks that are here, what steps do they have to take? The individuals that are in danger of being picked up by ICE, or the individuals that may have an expiring visa or looking to come here. What advice do we have for them?
Come see me. or someone reputable, a reputable immigration attorney. If there's a visa that's going to expire, if a person is about to be out of status, what I see more commonly are people who have existing removal orders, and perhaps under the Obama administration, when that administration allowed for what's called deferred action, which means we know you have a removal order, but we're just going to let you stay here. We're going to look the other way, and we're going to go after other people who we consider higher priorities. That was done away with. That was one of the first things that the Trump administration did away with deferred action. So people with removal orders should definitely consult with an immigration attorney. I found that people from certain countries with removal orders grew a little complacent under the previous administration, and they still think that nothing's going to happen. The two countries that I'm thinking of particularly are Cuba and Iraq. Yes. So it's important to find someone reputable, not just someone who's going to say, sure, hire me, here, sign on the dotted line. That'll be, $2,000, whatever it is, and then, what's going on with my case. So,
Thank you. And I'm just going to add 2 points before we open it up to questions. One, if you or a family member has a green card and you're eligible to apply for citizenship, now's the time to apply for citizenship. Don't wait. Oftentimes, a lot of the cases we see are individuals that have a green card. They've been here with a green card. They may have had an opportunity to apply for citizenship 7, 8 years ago, and all of a sudden they're in a position they shouldn't be in, or in a place they shouldn't be in, and the law enforcement gets involved, and now they're facing removal or deportation. So apply for that citizenship. 2, green card holders that want to bring their spouses here. I don't know, Sergio, you may correct me, but right now the visa processing dates are current with the State Department. So there's a little bit of a, there's still a wait, but it's a little bit of a less wait for green card holders that want to bring their spouses here. So I know within the Arab community, we face a lot that. And the final point, before we open it up, is pay attention to what we're calling the backdoor Muslim ban. And I know the Muslim ban policy is there, it's preventing people from coming in, but the backdoor policies are the ones that are most alarming. The denial of visas, the delaying of the green card, of the visa applications. We're dealing with a number of individuals from countries like Lebanon, or countries where, are not on the list, or don't have, seem to be a security threat to the U.S. But you're seeing these visa applications taking 6 months, 9 months, a year, or even longer to process. This is done intentionally. This is done so individuals say, you know what, I don't want to come to the U.S. And the numbers are showing. From the Arab countries, we've seen a 40% decrease in the number of student visas since Trump has taken office. So they're reaching their objective. We're seeing a decrease in the number of visas given out to Arab countries and applications to Arab countries because people just don't want to deal with it. And it's not just the Arab countries that are going through it, it's other countries as well from our communities. So you are seeing this backdoor ban on brown and black communities, people just saying, to hell with this, I'm going to go to Europe. Actually, we're seeing more individuals visit Mexico or South America and saying, I don't want anything to do with it. I don't need to visit Disneyland. I'm going to go elsewhere. So we are seeing an impact on this, and this will also have an impact, we get into this later, in the number of qualified workers we want to bring in, the number of qualified professionals, whether they be medical or engineers or otherwise, and the number of qualified individuals to our universities. So we are seeing folks just foregoing coming to the U.S., period. And that's something to keep an eye out on. We'll open it up for questions. I know we have Talar with the microphone, and then we'll...
Is it true that a newborn from a mother non-citizen cannot take automatic citizenship now?
So this is
A newborn, I didn't understand.
Born here, obviously.
A newborn born in the U.S.
Yes.
Non-citizen mother.
A lot of visitor comes here. They have their own baby. They become
Yeah.
citizen automatically. I heard recently that that no longer in place.
That is not the case. So the tradition here in this country, and yet the Constitution guarantees that everyone born here is a citizen.
Yeah.
That is guaranteed by the 14th Amendment of the Constitution. That is not something that this administration or any other administration can change. They don't like that fact,
Right.
and they want to argue that that's not the case, but the Constitution guarantees that. It's
Well, that's fine. We don't need to talk about that. Thank you.
Yeah. I mean, I'm
the law.
that's the law.
Thank you so much for talking about legislative front, because I think regardless of what happens, you're right, the president does have a lot of power to set a figure. And a few years ago, about 4 years ago, I started working for a refugee resettlement agency in LA, thinking I was going to use my Arabic to help Syrian refugees, or use my Spanish to help some people coming from Honduras, Guatemala, or El Salvador. And I was shocked to find out about something called the Lautenberg Amendment. So I would like for you to talk about that, because I found out I really should be beefing up my Armenian, because Armenians were able to come to this country. At one point, they needed to prove persecution in Iran, in another country in the Middle East, but then that kind of went away. And so I just found it arbitrary that someone, just by virtue of being a member of an ethnic group, you don't have to show proof that you were persecuted, but other people who clearly are being persecuted don't have the same exit strategy, to leave that country. So could you talk about that? And then also, the other thing I was shocked to find out is that in this country in 1980, there are 7 or 9 refugee resettlement agencies. Most of them they're Christian, there's a Jewish one, there wasn't a Muslim one. And I'm just curious if that's something our community can ever work on, or it just seems that that's a lot of the refugees in the world. And so if you could address those two things.
So, I'm not an expert in Lautenberg per se, but maybe I can try to answer the question on a higher level of generality. So there have been some specific laws in place that say, okay, well, if you're a member of this group, we understand there's a particular problem happening. We want to create a pathway to address this problem and ensure that there's access. It's happened for the Armenian community. It's happened for others as well. And then we have the general federal law when it comes to how we're going to handle refugee admissions. And as my colleague said, there it's kind of a general question. Can you show that you're a member of a particular social group that has been persecuted? Can you go through, either if you're a refugee or asylee, there's slightly different standards, but you're supposed to be able to go through particular processes. One of the big problems that we saw is that this generalized group versus the specific group got drastically reduced under this current administration. I think the current suggestion is only 18,000 for the next calendar year. That is almost 10 times less, or than it had been under the last years of the Obama administration, at a time when we have a greater refugee crisis in this world. And so this is one of those examples of how federal law offers way too much power to the executive, unchecked by the legislative branch, and unchecked by having to show sufficient justification. And we have the power, if we ever have legislators that are accountable to us, to change these things. We could put a process in place where if they want to change that number in a downward fashion, they have to show real reasons. They didn't have to this time. If the number's pegged to some kind of official accounting, if they have to provide actual explanations, because right now they are able to drop it in an unchecked fashion. There's challenges to that, and those are ongoing, but it's one of the difficulties that we face. And it's a difficulty that we're going to continue to face if we have executive branches that are willing to play politics with vulnerable communities' lives.
Thank you.
Yeah.
We got time for a couple more.
Good afternoon. Well, I've heard different solutions from you in terms of one avenue is legislative, to essentially go to a Congress that does nothing. One avenue is to endlessly get tied up in litigation for many, many years and then go in front of a conservative Supreme Court that upheld the Muslim ban. And I'd also, you also brought up voting, but frankly, in our community is very fractured and divided, because there are many socially conservative Arabs that are anti-gay, anti-abortion, and they're going to still vote for Trump, regardless of our civil rights. So I'd like to hear with this premise, what you think the best solution is moving forward? Do we continue to go to court? Do we get more, Rashida Tlaib's in Congress? Or, in her words, impeach the mother blanker?
Well,
I can take
look,
that
I
one.
mean, as I said, we're a nonpartisan organization. We can't endorse one party over another. But, I mean, you could make sure your party doesn't hate, Arabs and Muslims. I mean, you got to look at your track record and the policies they're supporting. And, yes, a number of Arabs do come out on the socially conservative issue, but I think that trend has been changing. If some statistics show that trend has been changing in the past few years. I think now a lot of the Arab electorate is looking, particularly in states where, frankly, the vote matters a little more, like Michigan and Virginia and Florida. The Arabs not only are tired of the bigotry, the hatred, the hate crimes, but, these economic policies, and that's a whole separate conversation, are not really working out the way they thought they were. And he won by under 8,000 votes between, Wisconsin and Michigan. So, yes, the Arabs need to come out and vote. Whatever way they vote, we're not going to tell them. But, hold your elected officials accountable. Get in the room and demand answers from them. Where do you stand on certain policies? Where do you stand on certain issues? And if we can bring in 10, 20, 30 more Rashida Tlaibs in office, that would be wonderful, because you need those individuals that are outspoken, that are unapologetically Arab, that don't hide their background, that are not afraid to say, they're Palestinian or they're Syrian, Lebanese, or whatever, and they are a voice for the community. So we would welcome more, individuals of that background being elected, as far as their policies are in line with what's best for the community. And I think that's what we as a community heading into the next election need to look at. And it's not just federal issues, it's local issues as well. It's a lot of these state legislatures are driving some of these anti-immigrant policies. Some of these BDS and First Amendment policies are happening at the state level. So how do we engage even on a state level and on a county level across the board? And we're at a crucial point in this country's history, and Arabs do hold a swing vote, as does the Latinx community on a number of other states as well on these issues.
If I may.
go ahead.
So I come from a community that is also socially conservative, that has strong views about abortion, has strong views about LGBTQ issues. But one of the things that I think it's useful to keep in mind is that we are 25 years, this is the 25th anniversary of kind of a landmark occurrence that happened here in California. In 1994, California passed one of the most onerous and immoral anti-immigrant laws in the country. It was on the forefront. It was Trump before Trump,
Right.
25 years ago. It was called Prop 187. We used various tools to fight it back. We used the courts to block it, and then we built political power. And there will not be another Prop 187 here in California. And because we understood that our communities were under attack, that's maybe the first thing we can do, is we can realize we have some common issues. But politics takes work. It takes sometimes time to talk to communities, see how there's relationships between issues. And I'm not going to say that I have the solution for all of the socially conservative issues, but I can tell you that my Latino father, who was in the military and had a lot of conservative views, and at some point came to me and said, you know what, your primo so-and-so, they might be gay, and thought of it as a problem, later on voted for marriage equality. Because, it's going to take work in our communities to link issues together and to realize the same people who are attacking those people over there are attacking us and attacking those people over there. And if we think that we want a more just world that treats us all more fair and treats us all with dignity, then I think we're going to have to do that kind of work to build the political power to build that world.
And and just to take it back one more step, and on the state level, if you look at the states that introduced the anti-BDS legislation, they line up almost identical to the states that introduced restrictive LGBT and anti-LGBT equality bills. So these states are peddling hate against everybody, and it's almost identical to the T on where it's coming from. We have time for one or two more questions in the back.
So when we talk about undocumented immigrants, we unfortunately relate the issue only to Mexico or other Latin American countries. And because of that, we can't get our Arab-speaking communities and even the South Asian communities to get on board with the border issues and the wall issues. Can you shed light on the fact that how many undocumented immigrants are from these Arab-speaking countries? I know the South Asian community doesn't want to admit, but there is a lot of South Asian communities that are undocumented as well.
I thank you for that question. I think it's a huge problem. I think as Arab Americans, we tend to think, well, we're an old immigrant population. We've been here for a century. We're not undocumented. We don't have that issue. There are Yemenis walking across the southwest border today because of the humanitarian crisis. I hear that every day from my constituents across this country, and they are undocumented. So we have a problem in this country, and it's impacting not just our Latino brothers and sisters and Latina sisters, but it's impacting Arabs too. And let me just tell you that even if you are American and you have US citizenship and you have everything squared away, you can't bring your family member to this country. If you're Yemeni and you have a wife who is living overseas and she's not a US citizen, you can't bring her here under the current ban. And if you can't see that no ban, no wall is the same thing, that we are one, then you're missing the point, and we have no chance against this machine against us. So we need to get it together, and we need to stop with the pettiness and really see the bigger picture. So I really appreciate the question. I worked with so many South Asian community members from Bangladesh and Pakistan and India, and they are also being attacked. And it's very difficult for us to say, oh, we did something wrong, we broke the law. It's okay if you're undocumented. You know what I mean? Like, you break the law, it's okay. That doesn't mean that you should be sent back and tortured to death. You know what I mean? So it's, at the end of the day, I think it takes work. I think my brother just said it perfectly from Nilk. It's all three: litigation, advocacy, and civic engagement. We have to be engaged. Run for office. Be part of the school board. Be part of your PTA. Whatever you can do, whatever little thing you can do, do it. Because it really does make a difference. It really does. It seems petty, but it's actually not. It matters. At the local level, you don't all have to be, senators and representatives. Obviously, we would love if you are. But, just be engaged.
Thank you. We got one final question in the back.
The Constitution guarantees the president set the standards for immigration. Of what use would these legislative bills be?
I mean, yeah,
It's not a concept.
No, I'm very happy to answer this because part of the problem is that the Congress has put a very comprehensive immigration system out there that addresses a number of issues. We don't agree with all of them, but they structure the majority of how immigration is handled in this country. Unfortunately, that system, there are all these little loopholes in terms of giving too much authority to the president to make some determinations within this framework. Now, this administration has been very, very good about finding each one of those and exploiting them to their maximum and even beyond what the statutes allow. They've gotten away with it sometimes, and we've been able to block them sometimes. That's why something like a real, just, comprehensive immigration reform is going to be necessary at some time. Now, I've talked a little bit about politics before, and sometimes comprehensive immigration can be fraught, because when you're pushing for something good, your opponents can try to slip some bad stuff in there as well. So there's different strategies about how to fix the immigration system, and I'm not here to advocate for one or another, but we have to understand that there are several loopholes that are remnants of explicitly racist policies that are still being exploited today. And we need to find ways, like we partially did in the 60s, to restructure our immigration system so that these same racist practices can't continue.
Right, and I'll just say, Article 1 of the Constitution, Article 1 is Congress. Congress has the power to legislate and to fund. So they do have the purse strings and the power to curtail executive authority, right? So to the extent that there is massive deference, right, and huge authority given to the executive, Congress can close up those loopholes if they want to. And we have to make them do it.
Is there some way of finding out of what status Trump's wife and his in-laws are?
Well, right now, look, I think,
question.
I want to keep in mind
That's
this,
a different
but I want to touch on that question. It's an important point.
Yeah, it is.
And oftentimes we hear people say, oh, you know, it's along the lines of saying, well, this country should be on the Muslim ban, or this person should be removed, or I really don't care what her status is. I don't care what her political views are. If somebody is in here, whether it's Donald Trump's wife or Donald Trump's opponent's wife, they should be here. We should have a fair system, a fair immigration system for everybody. And I really don't care what his wife's status is, and I hope, and I don't wish upon her that she falls into the immigration system. Just like I don't wish on any other country being placed on the Muslim ban list. We need to get rid of these structures and put in place fair systems for everybody, regardless of political views, because if we're going to start deporting and placing in removals based on political views, now we're becoming a full-blown fascist country. So we're getting to that point. We're preventing people from coming in because of the way they're thinking or what they're writing, but we have to stop that. We have to flip our system and keep going. And on that note, I would encourage you all, the elections are coming up. Hold your candidates, hold your elected officials responsible, hold them accountable on the upcoming election and on these issues. And thank you all. The next session is going to start in here in 5 minutes, the Palestine session, so I do want to get everybody to take a few-minute break. I appreciate our panelists for joining us. Nico, Iman, Sergio, thank you for all you guys do for our communities. Thank you. Again, we don't want to talk about anybody's status or how you find out people's statuses on this issues. It's irrelevant on our conversation.
It's great that she was able to bring her parents over. We should all be able to do that
We
and
should
be with
all
our
be
parents.
able to bring our, exactly, we should all be able to bring our parents over.